Hello and welcome guys to another video. It's been a while since we've done a track guide, but we're going to be doing a track guide today for Lime Rock Park Classic in the Mazda MX5 Cup. This is for the Rookie Series, so it is fixed. We're going to run through the hot lap first, which was a 56.377. So I'll let you guys watch that without me talking, and then we'll jump into the track. So starting with our track guide here, for turns 1 and 2, we want to be on the left hand side of the track coming into the first corner now. Looking for this number 2 board, we want to brake just as we pass that. As you see, we're starting our braking now. We want to be braking about 55-60%. We're going to have a bit of a 4-wheel drift as we come to this corner, so you might need a slight counter steer. We want to trail off the brakes here, get off the brakes at this point and allow the car to drift out a bit wide so that we can have a bit of a wider entry into turn 2 here. As you see, you might want to just tap the brakes to give it a little bit more rotation, and then here I'm letting the car roll round the corner, and you can just blip the throttle to get the rear to step out a bit more and give you that extra rotation. Be careful not to use too much curb here because it can unsettle the car, but if you hit it with the throttle, make sure you've got your throttle on before you hit it, it can help rotate the car, so it is advisable to use it, just don't use too much, especially on cold tyres. As you see there, I'm going full throttle just before I hit that curb, and then you can use all this exit curbing here. Now coming into turn 3, we don't need to go all the way to the right, we just want to come to about the middle of the track, and then our focus for turn 3 is to exit on the left hand side of the track to open up turn 4. So I'll show you what I mean here. I lost about 7 thousandths here, so I did this a little bit slower than I usually would. You want to stay in second gear, little tap of the brakes, and just continue to try and keep the car rotated to hug this curb on the left hand side. Try not to overslow it. I overslow it slightly here, which is why I lost a little bit of time. But if you just tap the brakes just a little bit to keep it rotated, and then get on the throttle as early as possible, and you want to try and bring the car over to the left hand side. So as you see, it goes out wide a little bit to the middle, and then bring it over to the left, aiming for about here. So as you see, as soon as we straighten the wheel, we're immediately turning in for this corner. This is full throttle. The aim is to be full throttle every time for this right-hander. In some lower grip conditions, or when you're battling with someone, things like that, you may have to lift to about 80%. But the aim is to try and lose a little bit of time in that left-hander turn 3 so that you can be full throttle for this turn 4. Be careful with this curb not to use too much, especially if you don't hit it whilst on throttle, because you will understeer and hit the wall if you hit this curb wrong. So here we're using this curb to rotate the car, hitting it whilst on full throttle, and then using that rumble strip. But if you hit that curb wrong and touch the grass, you immediately hit the wall, so it's high risk, high reward. Coming into the next corner now, of course there's no chicane. Depending on the grip level, you will either need to tap the brakes 20% or so, or you can do a lift. With this grip conditions, we were able to just do a lift. We're looking for this curb on the left. That's going to be our reference point. See where the curb is straight and then straight, and there's a little angle here on the curb. You can just see as we get a bit closer. See this angle? That's kind of my reference marker to lift to about 50% throttle. So as you see there, I'm lifting to maybe more 30%, sorry, and then getting back on the throttle just as we hit this curb. Careful not to use too much of it, and trying to get the power nice and early to get up this hill. Now with this crest of the hill, try and make sure you have as minimal steering input as possible when you crest this hill, because if you have too much, the rear will step out and you will lose it. So here I have just a little bit of right steering input, as you can see, but almost perfectly straight as I go over, and I just do that slight counter steer, but I don't lose any time. If you have too much right input, you will lose the rear as you go over that crest, which can be a bit embarrassing in a race. In qualifying it's not too bad, but to lose it in a race there can be a little bit embarrassing, so be careful there. Now coming to this corner, there isn't really a reference marker, but as we get closer, there's a tree that sticks out that you can use as a reference marker. So this tree here, just before that, you can use as a reference marker. Obviously with all these trees it's hard to notice one that sticks out, but this one sticks out quite a bit, so it's easy to notice. There isn't really any other reference markers on the barriers, so that's a good reference marker you can use depending on the conditions. So just before that tree, as you see, just the tree there, we want to brake to about 20%, just enough to just slow the car down and get the front rotated. As you see, going to be a little bit of a four-wheel drift here. When we hit this curb, we just want a little bit of the curb, and we want to hit it whilst on throttle. Be careful not to use too much of the curb here, because again it's not very forgiving on the exit. So if you hit this curb wrong, it will punish you. So as you see there, using a bit of curb to rotate it, but making sure we were on throttle when we hit it, and using all the exit there. But if you get that curb wrong, as you can see, there's not much separating you and the barrier, so do be careful there. Now coming into the final corner, just as we crest this hill, we want to shift into fourth gear. It will spike slightly the revs as you crest the hill, so just wait for the rev to settle slightly and then shift. As you see, I just wait for it to blink, then I shift. This tree overhangs a bit. You can kind of use that just before there as your turn-in marker, or the shadow, but again, depending on the track conditions, you may or may not be able to see that as a reference point. You want to use very little of this curve, just a little bit to touch for the rotation. You should be able to do this turn full throttle in fourth gear. Depending on the track conditions, you may need to reduce the throttle to about 80-90%, but most of the time you'll be able to do this full throttle. As you see, turning in just before that shadow, full throttle, and aiming to hit, see how this line on the curb here, you don't want to go any higher than that line. So if you watch here, just kissing that curb just a little bit, gives us a little bit of rotation, and then open the wheel up as early as possible using that exit strip. So there you go guys, that is a track guide of Lime Rock Park Classic with a 56.377. So as always guys, thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and see you again next time.